Is Buddhism a religion of radical pacifism, or is it a religion where there are no black and whites, where there are many interpretations to ideas, and the moral framework as defined by the Buddhist precepts are to be used as guides rather than as rules or as principles? So the idea of radical pacifism states that no matter what the conditions are, no matter what circumstances a person might find themselves in, they are to refrain from killing or taking part in violence. So the first precept in the mainstream Buddhist community, there are 5 precepts. The first precept is to abstain from taking life of human beings. Generally, when a person decides that they're gonna take up the practice of a Buddhist, they take up the 5 precepts to begin with. And so then it becomes a matter of how do you interpret the precepts to begin with? Is it a guide for life, or is it like a law handed down by God or the Buddha, and if you break it, you're going straight to hell? Or are there some other ways to interpret it? And depending on what position you take, could have very different implications on how one would live their life. Clearly, a lot of the Buddhist teaching is not meant to be taken at face value, and it's not just meant to be taken on faith. There are many discourses where Buddha emphasizes the importance of thinking for yourself, investigating, not just taking things that you have heard from teachers or from authority or from tradition on blind faith just because someone said so, but only after you've personally investigated it, analyzed it, and penetrated it, and come to agree with the stance, do you take it up as your own. So when it comes to the first precept of to not kill living beings, the question is, are there some exceptions? For example, what if your family is in danger? Can you take another person's life to save yourself or your children, your family members? How about the military? Can you join the army? Can you defend your country from foreign attack, from foreign invasion? Can you go on the offensive to a foreign land, for example, to save another from ruthless dictatorship? Can you defend your community from non-Buddhist foreign invaders who are threatening to take away your faith and destroy the community based around Buddhism, for example? So the radical pacifist position would say that under no circumstances is it okay to kill, even if it means the loss of your loved ones, your own life, your community, the religion of your community. The other perspective says that there are certain times when it is okay to kill another person, and the justification given is different in different countries. So, for example, we have the Dalai Lama who escaped Tibet with a rifle, and he's quoted as saying that if he was running away with somebody shooting at him, that it would be okay to shoot back in self-defense. And there are also scriptures in the Mahayana tradition. That's the reform version of Buddhism, which is integrated a lot of other teachings into Buddhism, which have some stories where it appears that there are some cases where it's okay to kill a criminal. So there's one story, for example, when there's somebody who is planning to sink a ship with all the members on the ship, and the commander finds out about it, and in order to save the crew and the ship, he kills the schemer, to supposedly out of compassion, so that the supposed criminal doesn't commit a greater karmic negative deed had he killed the crew member and sunk the ship. And so by killing the criminal, supposedly, you are choosing the lesser of the evils, and you're doing it out of compassion for the crew and out of compassion for the criminal, and it's supposed to be viewed as a selfless act of compassion. So that's one view. I disagree with it, but I want to just put it out there that there are these views. Then there is another position where in Sri Lanka, I looked at how the Sri Lankan government has justified violence against the Hindu Tamils. So for many, many years, for many generations, this has been an ongoing battle between the majority Buddhist population and the minority Hindus in Sri Lanka. The Buddhists view the Hindus as a threat to Buddhism in Sri Lanka. So there's a story in an old text called the Mahavamsa where there was a king and he went to war against the Hindus and he slaughtered all of them. Well, he killed a whole lot of people, and then he felt remorse, he felt sad, ashamed, and so he called a bunch of arahants. These are saintly people, enlightened beings, supposedly, to come and inspect, do an analysis of the situation, and let him know how much karmic bad deeds he has accomplished. So demerit, how much demerit has he accomplished? And so these arahants, they came and did their analysis, and they determined that he was guilty for 1.5 deaths because one of the people who had died had taken the 5 precepts, and half comes from one other person who had taken the triple refuge, which is kind of a traditional way of starting out on the Buddhist path and just saying, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the group of monks or the enlightened beings. So they determined that he was guilty for just 1.5 deaths, and all the other ones, they were not human. So he's not guilty for killing all the other people. So ever since that text, the Sri Lankan government, Sri Lankan Buddhists have used it as an excuse, as a justification to go to the extremes of violence against the Tamil population of Sri Lanka, saying that it's somehow okay to kill them because they're not humans, because they haven't taken the Buddhist precepts. And the same logic has also been used in Myanmar by the leaders, the Buddhist leaders in some cases, which other people no longer view as leaders. In Myanmar, they have been violently suppressing the Muslim minority, the Rohingya. This is a current situation. It's been going on for quite a while now. So these are a couple of examples of how violence has been justified, where we can see that Buddhists have taken the position other than of radical pacifism. Now, there's another couple of cases which we can also look at. For example, in Japan, this is in a Zen tradition, when they went to war, there was a movement of a monastic military, monk warrior, this idea. And in that case, this idea of the art of killing came about. And the philosophy in that case goes something like this. They use the teaching of emptiness, and that the ultimate nature of reality, of truth, is empty, and our belief and the perception of identity, of being individual beings, is all based on an illusion. And if you're seeing the world from an enlightened perspective, then there are really no beings, and there's nobody to kill, there's nobody who is committing a crime, It's just nature doing nature, which they've even gone so far as to say that that's the ultimate perspective, is to kind of see the transcendent in all acts, including in the acts of killing other people. So those are some of the extremes. Most Buddhists, I would say, do not take to these ideas. These ideas are very strongly argued against by the Buddha. There are many discourses where the Buddha clearly states that even there's, for example, a discourse where the Buddha says that to monks, that even if you are cut limb by limb by a double-handed saw, you are not to generate hatred towards the people who are doing this to you. So if a monk commits the act of killing under any circumstance, then they are considered defeated and they lose their status as a monk or a nun, and it's one of the 4 major offenses for a monk. But the 5 precepts, the first precept, to not kill, doesn't just apply to monks, it applies to lay people as well. So we shouldn't assume that, oh, this is just only applies for monks who are supposedly given up attachment to the world, so by just giving up their attachment to their own body, they can take on this responsibility of relinquishing their life for the sake of the precepts, but lay people somehow shouldn't be held to the same standards. And in some cases, clearly the rules are different, but the first rule is the same for monks and for lay people: to not kill living beings, to not kill humans specifically. So, is Buddhism a religion of radical pacifism? I think it is. There is a philosophical basis for maneuvering around this idea and somehow managing to come up with justifications, such as I've mentioned earlier. But it is kind of like being a lawyer and finding a legal loophole and to come out with a victory. But it is not done in the spirit of the law. So the law is written for the benefit of people, or should be. But sometimes not. Sometimes it can be used against the people. So in this case, it's like being a lawyer. You find a loophole out of the Buddhist legal framework, but really it comes down to the fact that you're going against the spirit of the teaching. You're going against the spirit of the Dhamma. And one other idea I wanted to discuss that I think is quite important is, why would Buddhism take on this position of radical pacifism if it were indeed the intention of the Buddha when he taught people to abstain from killing? Was it a radical position or a flexible position? So there's not a black and white answer in the scripture that says this is a radical position, there's no exceptions. There's a very strong weight towards it being radical pacifism. But let's just hypothetically examine this position. If this was indeed true, this was indeed the intention of the Buddha, for Buddhism to be radically pacifist, what would be the justification? What would that indicate about the nature of a spiritual life? And I was thinking about this, and Buddhism is really fundamentally based on a couple key fundamental ideas. One of which being the idea of cause and effect, the laws of karma, Kamma, in which we accept that all actions have consequences. So good actions will have beneficial consequences, bad actions will have undesirable consequences. And since Buddhism deals with the spiritual life, when we are talking about good and bad, it is on the scale of how it affects our spiritual life. So do we feel more at ease, more liberated in our hearts, in a spiritual sense? If so, then it's beneficial. Do we feel more tight, more constriction, more burdened, more imprisoned? If so, then there's a problem and it's a negative. So if radical pacifism is the way that we're supposed to understand the first precept, that would mean that the negative spiritual consequences of killing would always outweigh the positive. That would be the only reason why the radical position could be legitimate from the karmic standpoint, karmic perspective. Because if it was any otherwise, then we could say that there's some times when killing is okay and other times when it's not okay, depending on what is the greater karmic outcome. If the total outcome, karmic outcome, is positive, then you do what's necessary. And so the Buddha's position might, or most likely, is that the act of killing will override negatively any justification for it. And so I was thinking about what that might mean, and just thinking up some hypothetical situations. So for example, if you had the chance to kill Hitler or an assassin as he was in the middle of murdering a bunch of people, and if you had the chance to kill him to stop this the genocide, for example, in the radical position, killing that assassin would be worse than to let the assassin do his thing. That's a pretty difficult pill to swallow, but let's look at it a little bit deeper. So first of all, every single person ever born is going to die at some point. So just the fact that these people have died, that on its own is not enough of a reason to stop the killing. Everyone will die at some point. If you can stop the killing without killing yourself, then that would be right action, the right effort. But if you can't, and the only way is to kill, then that would be wrong. It would be like fighting fire with fire. So I also was thinking about just put myself in that position. So let's say I had something happen where let's say an intruder in my house killed my children. So first of all, I don't have children, so you might say that I'm not in the position to even imagine this scenario. But I'll just go along with it. You just go along with me for a bit. So let's say that someone has done something really wrong to my family members, and maybe they continue doing it to others now. And I feel this sense of justice, and I want to go and kill this person. So first of all, the teachings of the Buddha say that I should not do any action out of hatred. That's a sentiment, because my goal is, in a spiritual sense, is to get rid of hatred. First, inside of me, I should not act in hatred. I should also not act in greed. Conversely, I should generate a spirit of letting go, of renunciation, things like that. And so just to go along with this example, so somebody, this hypothetical person, went and killed people dear to me, and I go ahead and kill him. Well, once they're killed, I might have satisfied my sense of vendetta, but I don't actually feel good about it. I don't feel at ease now. I don't feel a sense of peace within. I end up feeling cold inside, probably like a deep resentment and anger just stays somewhere deep inside. A lack of trust in humanity, maybe fear of humanity. These kinds of energies take a base inside my heart and mind as a consequence of killing this person who has killed people dear to me. Now let's examine the alternative. Let's say there's a person, he went and killed people dear to me, and I decide not to take revenge. I make all the possible effort to surrender any sort of hatred or animosity towards the person, even in such dire circumstances. I try to forgive the person. It's not a justification for his actions. There's no justification for wrong actions. It's not the point. The point is that I don't harbor ill will, and the situation just is resolved in that way. So the outcome is that when I reflect on on what has happened, yes, I may have grief at the loss of my dear family members or friends or whoever was killed by that criminal or assassin, but I don't harbor that sense of coldness, of resentment, of hatred towards anybody. And I haven't lost the faith that there's goodness in people. And why is that? Is because I still have kept my own dignity. I have stayed true to the spirit of peace within myself. And so I maintain faith in the goodness of humanity just by keeping the precepts myself, even in such difficult situation. And it comes to mind. There's these quotes. It's like the true spirit or true character of a person is tested in times of hardship, not when everything is going smoothly. And that makes sense, makes a lot of sense to me. So that about covers what I wanted to discuss. Oh yeah, there is one other thing that I saw another video on YouTube where this monk was discussing this very topic, and he said that if you are in this position where someone's about to kill others and you have this choice, do you kill the aggressor or not? You don't you don't kill the aggressor. That monk advises asking for help from higher beings. And since that monk is from the Chinese Mahayana tradition, he was advising to pray to Kuan Yin. That's the Bodhisattva in their tradition. So you don't have to be in that tradition in order to understand or that idea of asking for help from a higher power. I understand that that might require some faith that there are higher powers out there, but I think even to act in the spirit of radical pacifism requires faith in the kind of karmic causality that I just discussed, that the total outcome of beneficial outcome versus unbeneficial outcome is always in favor of radical pacifism than not. So yeah, that covers what I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read some text, if you've heard something where people have more to add to this discussion. This is not a common topic that I've seen discussed. Yeah, that's it for now. Have a good day. Take care. Goodbye, guys.